kind of coffee do you have?
It's some type of Mexican coffee. It came from this place called the Home Ground Deli and Coffee Bar.
Is it like a Chiapas or a Oaxaca?
It is a Chiapas.
Really? I nailed it on the first try?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Man.
What's that about?
Well, that's a state in Mexico. But Chiapas is at the very bottom of the country down there. I think, bordering with Guatemala.
Like Zihuatanejo type zone down there?
No, I don't remember off the top of my head where Zihuatanejo is. I think that's in Oaxaca, right?
That's where they went in Shawshank Redemption. So that's what everybody, I think, thinks of the United States. Like, it's way south Mexico, right? Like somewhere.
Yeah, Chiapas is down there, bro. I got some really good friends. Actually, I got a fellow gamer friend. I call him, his name is Angel, but I always call him Angelito de mi corazón because I love the guy. I think he hates it when I call him that, though.
It means like in my heart or something.
A little angel of my heart. Well, his name is Angel, right? Angel.
Okay.
So it's Angelito de mi corazón. And if you hear this, Angel, I'm not taking this out, man. This is staying in the episode.
Yeah.
Dude, he's a savage, man. He'll game the shit out of a console, man. Remember when we were talking about in that one episode how there's some Warzone guys that'll just come out of like every round with like at least 12, 13, 15 kills? Angelito de mi corazón is one of those savages.
I can't imagine what that's like. Not at all. I do watch streamers, and such that seem to be getting those kind of numbers, but great day.
Yeah, man.
You know what it's like for me. 2-3 kills and
Hey, we were having some fun in those last few rounds.
It has been fun. I've got to start moving when I'm shooting. Like, I kind of just stand there, and I'm pretty sure that's what's going wrong, but...
Well, the last few rounds we've been playing these last couple days have been real fun, man, and we've been getting some kills. That game is fun.
Yeah.
It's a good game to jump into when you just need some immediate action.
Yeah.
Especially when we're playing all those survival games. It's good to switch over and just get in there.
Yeah. It does get the heart going. Wonder what the new update's about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I did let that finish up. I do have that. So I'm excited to look into that and see what they changed up. Man, speaking of updates, hold on. Let's get this party started, and then we can chit chat a little bit before jumping into the topic of today. Welcome, listeners, gamers, non-gamers, PvEers, PvPers, and even NPCs. We do not discriminate. We're happy to have you here. This is the New Wave Gaming Podcast with your hosts, ChukTomoahawk. Say hi, Chuck.
Hey, what's up, Ovox? Welcome, listeners.
Yeah. And myself, another co-host of this amazing podcast, Ovox here, reporting for duty. And in this podcast, we like to talk about basically old gaming stuff, retro gaming, gaming consoles, games themselves, experiences that we enjoyed from our gaming lives back in the day, and relate them to gaming today and how it's all evolved, and the new experiences that we have with online gaming and all these different consoles. And gosh, there's so many topics that we want to get into, but that's pretty much what we like to talk about here. And we may use cheat codes from time to time, which is basically Google, just to make sure we're not completely off topic or making stuff up. But otherwise, that's what we like to get into. And that's, Tomahawk, what are we going to talk about today, man? I know this has been an important one for you. You've been wanting to dive into this.
The
Bust
Commodore 64. Yeah. It's really surprised me how much interest there is out there. I knew I had some sweet memories as a kid from it, and it's really put my memories in perspective now that I kind of have a larger view of what it was and has become. So yeah, and I think one of the interesting things for me is too, I found that this might be where maybe I started thinking about console versus PC, and which games I like the most. So yeah, I'm excited to get into into that a little bit later on, and
I'm excited as well, man. This was a fun one to research, and the amount of information out there and the amount of resources and games, holy tamale, the amount of games and just everything. This was a real fun topic to look at, especially for me as a person that's never touched one. At least according to my memory, I don't remember ever getting my hands on one of these things. So it was really fun to look at and just see how much there was regarding this computer.
Yeah.
I mean, just in that, I thought it was a console, to be honest with you, when you first mentioned it.
It kind of bridges that gap a little bit. You've got the cartridge port, so yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
But hey, real quick, before we get moving forward here, quick shout out to some subscribers there on the YouTube. We're really stoked to have you subscribing and checking out the videos there on YouTube. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the major platforms. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the content. And yeah, a huge shout out to let me pull this up right here. I should have had this already open, but we're just really stoked and appreciative. Yeah, huge shout out to Steven Durant, dropping some love on YouTube from the UK. I think that's like one of our first international listeners. Appreciate it. And a huge shout out to NGP Odd Gaming for showing the love there on YouTube as well. We appreciate it. And honestly, to all the other followers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the other subscribers we have here, honestly, I'd name every one of you sexy people out. I'd name you out if your names were here, but all that information is hidden. These are the only names popping up. So lots of love. Thank you guys for checking us out. And yeah, as an independent podcast, that's really, we depend on that, on those reviews, those likes, those subscribes, just to get the word out. If you enjoy the content, or if you know anyone that might like these conversations that we have, please feel free to share it out there.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that too. And I'd love to know more about the gaming scene in UK. It seems like we're running into those folks on ARC servers and here on the podcast as well. So,
man, just with Commodore 64, there's a lot here involving the UK, and I think the PAL format, which we can touch on in a little bit. It sounds like they had access to a lot of games that we didn't in the US, or that the US didn't have access to, rather, or at least not easily.
Yeah, it's interesting how these things get marketed differently in different countries and sort of have a different sort of outcome because of that. But
well, sweet. Well, hey, before we jump into it, you got anything out there? Any news? Anything you wanted to chit chat about before we get rolling, man? I got to tell you, I got some news for you, but please.
No, you go first. Do tell.
Man, I have been struggling with my PlayStation subscription renewal. I usually what I like to just get a card. Every year I'll go for the 12 months for the PlayStation Plus subscription, just to not have to worry about it. And you get a better deal at the end of the day. And I've never been a big fan of putting credit card info into the system, so I just get those cards. Fist Pump will help me with that. He'll get one, scratch it, send me the code and everything. And man, this time it didn't work, and that's it never happened to me before. Not trying to cheat the system or anything like that at all. We literally just scratched it off, typed the codes in, and it hasn't been working. And called the folks at PlayStation. They're super kind and helpful, but they had to bump it up to the next level, it sounds like, and I'm supposed to get an email. But until I get that email and can follow up, I'm stuck, man. I can't see you on the Ark. I can't see you in the No Man's Sky.
Yeah, you kind of like got me all naked and like didn't do anything to me there on No Man's Sky. I started having fun.
I was like, wait a minute, I got you naked. What are we talking about? That's gonna be a little.
Damn. Yeah, I guess like what I'm saying is I was having fun there, and I've been back a couple times since. I tried to get some resources on me, so you weren't having to hand me every last thing I needed to get my starship started there. But yeah, that's a deep game, man. Wow.
No Man's Sky, it's
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you've seen it all with Ark and all these other games we've been playing, but they each in their own way are quite deep.
Yeah, I kind of like I didn't follow the mission very much more. Like I just kind of went around looking for resources and, like I say, just trying to get myself like squared away, so that I'd have a few carbon nanotubes and things like that on me next time that we started to play. But I got up in the air and these sentinel things like started following me, and I thought like I'll get my starship and shoot them, and boy, that was a bad idea. Like,
They're like, oh, you shooting at us, boy?
turns out they got starships too.
Oh man, yeah, and they kind of have that like when you fight the Sentinels in No Man's Sky, which are this NPC that they kind of patrol the planets and stuff. But they'll attack you. And when they do, you'll notice that there's kind of like this Grand Theft Auto thing going on where there's like a bunch of stars up on the top. But they're not stars, though. They're like these little red circles, and there's 5 of them. Just like in Grand Theft Auto, you know how there's 5 little stars when you piss off the police? Same thing, man, in this game. You piss off the Sentinels, and you'll see it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then all of a sudden you got a whole fleet of little Sentinels attacking your little starship.
Yeah. The last one
they attacking your
like
little starfish.
A mud circle. They're at the end of those red circles because, like, man, once they got mad,
they're coming for you.
I felt like once I got back in my base, it chilled them out though. Like somehow they couldn't see me in there or whatever level I got like chilled up. They chilled out once I got in there. Like, but up until then, I thought I was gonna lose my ship, and like I was just like, God, this is gonna be hard to explain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully you get that squared away. You think it's like a because like you're in a different country or something? Like there's some kind of country code?
No, the gentleman that I spoke with from PlayStation said that it happens from time to time, and that it likely has something to do with their updating the PlayStation Plus platform. You know how they're about to release the new system like mid-June, where they're going to have the Essential, Premium, and those different packages. So he said it might have something to do with that, but what I'm going to do is just keep an eye out for that email. And in the meantime, I've been playing some Rust. You know, Rust is always a nerve-wracker, so that's been a little fun. And I've been playing some City Skylines, which is like a city building simulator, which is really nice. It's a lot better than SimCity, if you ask me. But been joining some other games while waiting for that to resolve itself. Hopefully soon, because in the meantime, yeah, like I mentioned, can't play with you guys on the PlayStation.
Yeah, that's kind of hard. I've definitely still been on the Ark on the PlayStation a whole bunch, but kind of like I say, getting ready on No Man's Sky there a little bit, and that's really been it. Like I haven't really played a lot else. Like that darn Ark. I'm looking for tech rexes on there right now. Like. It's like I've asked Mickey like where he gets the good ones, and he says Genesis, and I think he's telling me like Gen 2, I think maybe, and that's where I've been looking. But I feel like maybe the center might be my spot is where I've saw the most. But something tells me he's holding that one like crucial information on that one.
No, he's right. There's a spot there on that map where there's a lot of tech creatures in general, but it's also a very dangerous spot.
Is it Gen 2 or Genesis?
I think it's Genesis.
Okay.
Yeah. There's like a section, I think, where it's like you're basically on like an asteroid or on the moon or something.
Okay, yeah.
So you go there.
I don't know. And see, I'm afraid to go there, like, because I've never been, and like I've read like
it's nuts.
Yeah. I'll probably die there. Is like what I was getting at. So yeah, that does make sense then, because I don't know. Like I just felt like he seems to come back with them pretty fast, you know. Like once he decides he's going to get him, like he'll come back with a breeding pair, and like, man, I've been looking for those things, and like I find 3 or 4 each time I go, but like only one of them will have decent numbers, you know. Like it.
Yeah.
I think like our current server goes up to 250 something for tech creatures, so. I've gotten a 235 and I found a 243 and it walked into the lava like while I was taming it. Like I was so sad.
Fabulous. Does that remind you of the Quetzal with the water? Yeah.
A lot. Like, I tell you though, I'm ready for the Quetzals. Like I'm gonna tame a horse, and I'm gonna have that. Like I've been getting lassos and drops, so I'm gonna be ready for that situation. Like there's a way to fix that. Like as long as the sharks or anything don't get him, you can lasso him and pull him out of the water. I've watched videos. So.
Damn! I didn't know that.
Something else they have on this server, and I'll quit talking about Ark if I can say this one more thing. But they have like a horse racing league, and I think it's today. Like I want to say it's this evening sometime. Like they've got a track set up, and like maybe the guy that's running the server provides the horses, but we're going to race horses. I think.
Man, he better provide the horses. Otherwise, anyone that shows up can have like a super, max level horse that's been, mutated a million times over.
Yeah.
Super fast. It'd be like a horse that with manic armor speed.
There's
You'll
some
win.
part like they have like something called the last man standing thing, like where I think you can bring like whatever you've done to your dino. Like they'll pick a dino and like you show up with your best one, and it's kind of like a little place to get some PvP action in on that PvE server. But dude, I've been like just speaking in general survival games, like we talked about in our last episode, I've been on this PvE, and like it's so much more relaxing. Like I certainly see the benefit, and excitement of the PvP, but man, it is so nice to just not worry about that,
Something I enjoyed about the PvE server was the ability to have that and still play PvP. So that even if stuff goes wrong in PvP and you wake up one morning and everything's been raided and you don't even have a base left, you can always just be like, damn, that sucks. But you can always like respawn in your PvE base, and everything's gonna be there. And at least you can like lean on it as like a support. Like at least I got this place.
One interesting thing too is like I've had a lot more contact with other players on this server than I've ever had. Like since it is PvE, and honestly, like I think it'll still let you attack someone else, but it doesn't hurt them, and it shows the damage in red, kind of like. And I was getting eggs on Ragnarok the other day, and this guy like slipped up behind me, and I thought he was a wild dragon, so I started just gnawing on him, and he typed in the thing like, "You good?" Like, and I was like, I mean, we almost got a fight started. Like,
yeah, but you can't though because it's PvE.
Right, and it's actually like I think prevented. Like we can't damage each other even if we want to or whatever. But like. I was just kind of like, what did you think I was going to do? Like, I'm in here, like, surviving, like, my life. Like, I'm on a tropical wyvern, and lightning wyverns are flying up on me. Like, what do you think I'm going to do? Like, I'm going to bite first and ask questions later. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's PvE, though. You're not going to get anywhere, man. That's the thing about PvE is that,
Yeah.
That's why I ended up leaving it. Eventually, it was like, well, I've done every single thing that you can do in this little PvE scene. And then you want that anxiety back, like we talked about in the survival episode.
Yeah.
Eventually it'll get boring for you, man. Sorry.
It will. It will. I think it's just allowing me to kind of explore some of the options, what I might do and that kind of thing. And maybe like, and Mickey hasn't been on a ton lately, so I may end up doing those boss fights alone, but I hope he gets back on and like sees those tech rexes and kind of wants to get involved in that. But I think he's been playing maybe some Apex Legends or something lately. So, but yeah, but no, like I did kind of have like some little micro topic things that I thought might be fun to talk about. Like one of the things I meant to talk about last week that I'd forgotten is I was doing some research, and I saw these prisoners like in jail playing a video game system, and I'm pretty sure it was a PlayStation. And I just thought that was an interesting question. Like, like should prisoners be allowed to do that? And then like it also made me think like, well, if you did say so that they could, like, would you restrict certain games like Grand Theft Auto and things like that? And could there possibly be like some, in the opposite of Grand Theft Auto, like some type of rehabilitation, type thing?
Yeah, man, it depends. It's all about that good behavior.
Yeah.
You know?
I know.
It's
I'd
like,
be a
damn,
good
man,
boy in
homeboy made
prison.
like 50 license plates the other day. We got to hook him up with that. Angry Birds too, you know what I'm saying?
Oh my God. Can you imagine though, just like sitting in a cell like that with nothing to do and versus not having a PlayStation versus having a PlayStation? It would be unreal. Like I'd do whatever I had to do. Like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that is,
But-
you know, I don't know. I think it's a situational thing, like depends on the inmate, you know, whether they can have access to stuff like that. There can probably be a real clear-cut answer or maybe a not so clear-cut answer, you know? It depends.
Yeah. I think some people feel like, you know, inmates should suffer and that kind of thing and you know, pay for their crimes and shouldn't have TV and you know, everything should be tough for them. But I also think that person's going to come out of there someday if, you know, if their crime isn't like, you know, a life sentence type thing. And, you know, maybe if they can reintegrate in society and kind of, you know, learn some social skills, things like that you can online, maybe. Probably not online. You know, I imagine they would exploit that somehow. But yeah, maybe.
What
some
games
friendly-
were they playing?
I think
what-
it might have been like a sports game or something like basketball, and I could see that being okay. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto, like that's just.
You have any other games that come to mind that you don't think they should be playing up in state lockdown?
Probably not that. I think I found a game on this. Like the games on this Commodore thing are limitless. There's a game
Oh,
called
man, what-
Sex or something. Isn't
Oh,
it?
you saw that? Sex games? What is up with sex games?
I'm pretty sure they shouldn't be allowed to play sex
Like,
games.
I saw that too, man. In the picture, like I'm like, I gotta see the cover art of this game, and there's a picture of it. There's a picture of a guy that's got fucking half of his girth worm down this, you know.
Oh man.
Jeez. I couldn't believe it, but
Oh god, that reminds me of my new. Once I get tired of ChukTomoahawk, I'm gonna change my gamer name to Girthquake.
Oh, jeez.
That's the new one.
I don't know.
Yeah.
ChukTomoahawk's such a great name, man. I don't know.
It is,
know.
but I think they'd be doing some dirty things with that sex game. Like I saw this thing once, like where. Oh yeah, it's probably something we shouldn't get too explicit to go into, but like they were like people were drawing pornography on the wall essentially, like, and you know people were viewing it like they were looking at Playboys or something, and yeah, so
With like with art programmed using the Commodore.
no, they were just like hand drawing it, like with a Sharpie on their prison wall. or
Oh, in
whatever,
the
but
prisons.
it looked pretty good. I mean, you could imagine if you didn't have anything else.
Just, you know, get a dull knife and dig a little hole into the picture on the wall.
Got a lot of time on your hand there in jail. Yeah.
Name it Teresa.
Yeah.
Nothing against that name. I
It's
just,
like, hey man, I'll give you 2 of these ramen soups if you draw me a picture of Katy Perry.
oh jeez. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So maybe I don't know. Video games in prison, maybe not the best idea.
Where did you spot that, or why did that come into your radar?
Oh, that's a good question. Like I forget exactly what it was. I've always kind of enjoyed. Like I have no desire to go to prison or do anything wrong, but illegal or anything like that. But prison shows like kind of fascinate me, like the ones on like National Geographic and that kind of thing. So it may have showed up on my For You page or something like that on TikTok because of that. But I think it might have just been like a YouTube video or something like that. But
Fair enough. Well,
yeah.
watch Prison Break if you haven't seen it yet.
Prison Break. What is that? Is that a like
It's
a
a
movie
series.
or-
It's a series. It's I don't remember when it was from. I know it's not going anymore. I think it was like 5 seasons, maybe less, maybe more. But if you haven't seen it, jot that one down. You'll love it.
I think I may have saw that like advertised on Discovery Channel or something. But yeah, I just thought that was a funny question to think about. But do you remember like what your first computer experience was? Like what kind of computer it was and
Yeah.
what you were doing?
So My first computer, I can't say first computer experience, but my first computer memories kind of formulate around a very large PC that we had when we lived in Oregon. And this is early 90s. It was a very, very big machine. You know, it had the huge square box monitor, and it had a huge hard drive that sat, you know, like up to your knee of like a grown, you know, person, like a big old hard drive. And it wasn't, you know, that we're talking about the early 90s. It wasn't one of those badass Corsair, beautiful, like gaming PC hard drives you see today with all the tubing and wiring nice and like, you know, with neon lights inside and giant fans. No, we're talking about some huge, heavy hard drive back in the day. And we started with, I think it was like Windows 2.0 or 3.0 or something like that. It may have been Windows 95, but it was one of the very first Windows operating systems. And my first gaming memories on that formulate around, I think it was called Minesweeper, definitely Solitaire, of course, and 3D Pinball. I think those were the games that were available there. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, a huge part of that, not that it's related to gaming, but a huge part of that PC memory, those first memories, was when internet first came out, you know, and that whole dial-up system of accessing the internet where it would make those sounds, you know, that... like,
K, baby.
Yeah, and then it would say, "You are connected." It's like, whoa, I'm online. Yeah, fist pump. Yeah. So that's kind of like where it began for me. And however, I do remember a friend of the family back in the day. I think I mentioned him before. Johnny G. This guy was a legend, man. Guy's a legend. He had the first Nintendo, but he also had, I think it was the Apple II.
Holy cow.
Yes, I believe so. It was an Apple computer, and I remember seeing that before we ever had that PC at our place. So that is my first memory of seeing a home computer device.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah.
You've been on the planet a little bit longer than Ovox.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, you know, we talked a little bit how the Intellivision kind of tried to fill that role. I never had that component for my Intellivision. So in my case, it was our topic today. The Commodore 64 was my first computer. I mean, I guess technically you could say I had like a really fancy calculator that they made. Like I think Tandy made it at some point there that you know, it was a bit of a computer. But yeah, as far as, you know, sitting down at a monitor with the keyboard, it was this thing right here, the Commodore 64.
How did it come into your life, Tomahawk, the Commodore?
I tried to think
was
about
it one
that
of those,
as I was researching it,
yeah.
And I feel like it has to be Kmart. Like there was the Kmart there in Rogersville. There was no Walmart back in those days, and I think they made a choice. Like I want to say maybe the VIC-20 wasn't marketed exactly like this, but they made a choice to go into department stores like that, and so it was there in the electronics department of the Kmart, and I just, you know,
it wasn't like it wasn't a Christmas scenario, like you coming downstairs, there's a box there, kind of looks like the size of a bread bin or a bread basket type of deal.
I would about have to say it had to be that way. You know, maybe as I got just a little bit older, my parents might do that thing like where they're like, hey, this is your Christmas present. Like we're not gonna, you know, go through that whole thing. You can go ahead and get it now, and you know, we'll just say this is for Christmas. But so I don't have like a clear memory of like opening it or anything like that. But I do remember, you know, that time period of getting it, and I would say it was probably around 81 or so, like 1981. So I would have been right at 10 years old, and I know that like it was linked to like my dad like was always encouraging me to do things to sort of grow as a person. So part of it like he was wanting me to take Spanish lessons at the Catholic church that was in our town, and
muy bien.
He wanted me to learn how to, in his word for it was to work a computer. Like, I don't know how you work a computer.
Yeah, but little we know, Tomahawk, you probably came to work the hell out of that Commodore, right?
Yeah, I was working it all right.
But wait, you said 81. It must have been 82, right? Because and maybe this is a great segue. We can just get going into this. I think it came out. Didn't it come out in 82?
I had some information like that. I think there was a electronics show there in January of 82. I think it was conceptualized around like 1979, but far as I want to say August of 82, after that January introduction at that show there in Las Vegas, it came out in August of 82. So you're exactly right. So I would have been around 11. I feel like it got, once it was marketed to like you didn't have to go to a specialty electronics store. You just went to the Kmart to get it. I'm sure that's probably when I got it. And man, that thing wasn't cheap. This is another place where I've got to thank my parents, like, because I read some numbers in that time frame. It was around $595.
Yep. It was released in August when you mentioned it hit retail at $595.
Whew, wow.
Yeah. What is that today?
I want to say like I saw some numbers like $1,200 or something like that. I've got it here in my notes somewhere. It's a chunk of change, and I think like I say, it had to be a Christmas present type situation, and a really big purchase. And the other thing is like you're not done when you get that. Like, you're going to need some disk drives. You're going to need some sort of monitor. I'm pretty sure I got like the old TV. I think my dad had as a bachelor or something like that. He had this little black and white TV that I got, and you need a couple floppy disk drives to go with that thing at least. If you're going to copy games, you need 2 of them.
Because when physically, it looks like it's just a keyboard. Yeah. When I looked at the pictures of the main component, not to be confused with the master component, which was the Intellivision episode, but the Commodore 64 itself looks just like a very tall, thick, long, rectangular keyboard. Right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. In fact, I think the original version of it, they had a name for it because it looked like a bread basket. I think they were calling it the bread basket or the bread bin or something to that effect.
Yeah. I figured that might be lost on some of our younger users, like because back in the day, you had this thing in the kitchen that was where your bread went, and it was sort of bread bin. Like, maybe I think we had one for onions or something. I guess that still kind of exists to some degree, but yeah. and it was sort of like used as this universal size delineator. Like, something was considered small if it was smaller than a bread box, and if it was bigger than a bread box, that was a size reference that you could use. I don't know where that originated from, but it is why I feel like they use that as a reference.
Yeah, the original one had I think something I noticed that was singular about this or innovative was its keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah, because nowadays you've got keyboards that are mechanical keyboards that you can go. When I picked out my keyboard, there was like 3 or 4 different actions you could kind of have. Like, some are a little more springy than others, and it really had a nice keyboard to begin with there, and you also didn't have like sort of a standardization of that. I think you had typewriters to go from, but far as how this was going to be laid out with the function keys and the number keys, like we're this sort of layout that we're used to today, like they were kind of they're making that up on their own, to
absolutely
to start that out.
What was if we had to get all technical about it, and start from square one, how would we define what the Commodore 64 is? Like, like if we get down to business, what's inside this bad boy? What is it? Especially for any of the younger listeners, like what are you guys even talking about? Commodore 64? What is this? The Nintendo 64?
Well,
is it related? No relation.
You pretty much described it. Like it is a home computer, and it's got a number of ports on it. There are different ways that you can get into it. You've got a floppy disk drive. You've got a tape drive port. You've got a cartridge port. So, I think this is the first in the beginning of personal computers. Like you had, some other versions. Atari had kind of made a thing there a couple years earlier, and so it's.
I think Apple had their computer out already, right? Apple had one out, and there was also. I was looking at this. I think it's called the ZX Spectrum in the UK or in Europe. I might be wrong there, but one of those two, like Europe in general, or just the UK. They had another one out already. So I think that was kind of like what the Commodore business company or Commodore International, that was kind of their idea, right? Was to create something to get their piece of the market in there that was also more accessible in price to way more people, to a much larger market. They also, I think it was part of their marketing. They had a catchphrase. Gosh darn, let me find that real quick.
Computing for the masses and not the classes.
Yes, that's it. For the masses, not the classes.
Yeah. I mean, I know I kind of danced around your question there. It's an 8-bit home computer is essentially, the short answer to that question. But I think what it's become is I feel like one of the reasons I was really attracted to it was the good memories that I had from it, but I also recognize it was sort of like the beginning of programming for a lot of people, and I feel like it kind of is. We came to a point where you had like there was no user interface, no GUI, like general user interface here, like other than you were there at the prompt, and since then we've gone into Windows, and a lot of that is kind of behind the scenes for most people, and I feel like it's kind of like I read some articles of why it stayed so popular is like it's a really accessible. I think even like really good programmers like the challenges that are to make a game for it. So yeah, it's incredibly significant, and besides having the good memories of it, I think one of the reasons that it's important that we talk about it is that the Guinness Book of World Records recognize it as the best-selling computer model of all time, like single computer model.
When you first mentioned that, if you remember, I kind of was like, nah, man, that can't be true. You need to check that out, and you need to make sure that's before you mention that on the podcast. No, it is. Yeah. It's broke records.
Yeah, 12 to 17 million units, I think, there at production. So incredibly significant, and a lot of really cool things have come out of it.
That's something that I saw pop up a lot was what you mentioned, that basically you had a device here that became accessible to way more people because of its price, which now in retrospect we can look at, and I think we can both agree that it was still a hefty price when we look at the price of computing technology today, gaming consoles. I mean, technically gaming consoles sits in a different category, because this was a computer, but for I think at today's price, it was released in August of 1982 at $595, but today that's about $1,200. So I can say right now, for example, that my little humble gaming laptop here, which is like bottom of the barrel gaming laptops, was less money than 1,200.
Yeah.
So that's and this is it is a gaming laptop, so it can hold its weight. So I just think in terms of money and pricing, maybe that speaks to the economy back then a little bit too as well, because they're very clearly saying here that price was no longer, they were looking at it as no longer an issue by lowering it to $595. So that's kind of interesting. I find that to be interesting, their pricing there.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of just seeing the beginnings of micro computing, like where these things have become small enough. I think one of the things I wanted to talk about was those Zork games. Originally, like that Zork game was on a mainframe computer, and to get it onto this platform of the Commodore 64, they had to break it into 3 parts. And you think about the fact that those 3 parts like pretty much filled up like a computer that's the size of the room that I'm sitting in. So, you're
and that's
you're
a text-based game.
Yeah, a huge leap forward, and for something to exactly. It has no graphics whatsoever, and so it's really a jump forward, and I think that's one of the reasons people were probably willing to pay that price. You also didn't have, I feel like today, like you could go onto Amazon probably and type in. I guess my point is I could probably find say if I was thinking of getting a Game Boy, like I can find a knockoff Game Boy now, or some sort of system like that. So there was no other options, I guess is what I'm getting at. Is it wasn't like I could get this cheaper somewhere else, or find some other version of it.
Yeah.
Like it was in.
Yeah, back then it was.
So I think that increased the demand, which increases the price. You had a new frontier kind of thing.
What my main thought there, what I was going to get at beyond the pricing, the pricing was huge because, if I don't have them here, I should have written them down, but the Apple II at the time was going for over $1,000 for just the Apple II, and then I think it was the Sinclair. Was also going for a hefty price. It might not be the Sinclair, it may have been an IBM. I don't remember, but you can find this information online. But the Commodore sat at a much lower price. This is the Commodore 64. And they already had success with the VIC-20, and they had success with the Commodore PET, which was the very first iteration, I believe. So they had some successful machinery with those. And I think when the Commodore 64 came out, they had the rep. They had the good history, we'll say. And I'm just speculating here, but this is kind of just what I gathered from researching this. So the Commodore 64 came out at a great price. All these people had access to it. And I think it created a generation. You kind of touched on this. Like it opened the door to a new generation of programmers because from what I gathered, this was a system where you basically turned it on and you had to make it work.
Yeah.
If you acquired or purchased or were gifted or Santa came and dropped a Commodore 64 under the tree, you were accepting the task of becoming a programmer.
Yeah.
Because basically you turn it on. Exactly. Well,
when you go to load a game, like you've got to type in like quotation mark, star, quotation mark, comma, load. And if you put a space in there or hit the period instead of the comma, it ain't going anywhere. You just paid, you went to the retail store there, Kmart, wherever, you picked up the game, you've gotten home with it, and you're trying to load that bad boy, and it ain't going anywhere. And, I think this is kind of a service that consoles provided for us that we didn't realize. Like, it kind of made it user accessible, but there's also something pretty darn cool about that. I think at the time, too, like put yourself in that, era of the Cold War. So there was this movie out. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it kind of was had computers heavily involved in it, and there was this kid, and like he was hacking into that system, and it looks a lot like this, it kind of gave you this access to a whole new world that was kind of
Man.
yeah, like you saw it, you knew it was going to be important in the future, and I think that's what my dad was feeling like. It's like, we got to get this boy on this thing so he can, excel in life later. Like, he's got to learn how to work a computer.
Yeah, man, he's gonna have a podcast in the future.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He's gonna have to navigate, Audacity and all these things. You see that today, I find myself, like, as people talk about the metaverse and NFTs and a lot of things, like I put it through that lens of when we were looking at this time from the 80s, and I find that no one really knows. I mean, you can make some estimates, just like he said, he wanted me to learn Spanish, and lo and behold, I went to Mexico at some point, and yeah, it could have been better, but I did have some idea, what I was getting into. But yeah, it's hard to make those predictions.
Oh, and it's hard to transmit the feeling, and this is coming from me as a person that was not, I wasn't up in gaming in those years. My gaming life began in the early 90s. So, for me, it was Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Sega Genesis. These were the things that my world were, formed around in the gaming aspect. But I think what's hard to kind of transmit and is, especially for younger gamers, is that this was a time when, I think color TVs were still hitting some homes, the whole digital experience, looking at a TV, seeing something transmitted, and then the first interactive systems coming out where you could interact with what you were seeing in the TV. This whole world, like you just described, was just brand spanking new. And I think for
Absolutely.
any young kid or young gal, young boy or young girl, to just, gosh, I can't even imagine what it must have been like, to experience these things for the first time of their own existence. Not just as a kid experiencing something for the first time, but the technology's just becoming to exist itself. So it's a real new frontier for kids from back then. And I think it's hard to kind of describe that to a younger gamer these days, so that they can kind of just kind of imagine what it must have been like, because we feel those sensations when we play new games, when a new console comes out. It's like, oh, the PlayStation 5's coming out, or the new Xbox is coming out, or whatever it may be, or NVIDIA's dropping a new graphics card, and we get real excited, real pumped. But we have a relative formulation in our brains of what we're going to expect, what it's going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. And back in this time with the Commodore, with the Commodore PET, with the first Atari and television, it was a brand new world for everyone. It was a brand new world for the programmers creating these things. It was a brand new world for the consumers and the little kids that were experiencing these just having these experiences for the first time. And then also the marketing end of it and the business end of it, this was all brand new frontiers for everyone. And I think there was a uniqueness to that. And of course, the world culture at the time, you mentioned the Cold War, a lot of technological breakthroughs, a lot of stuff was going on, I think, that kind of made it even extra special for young gamers of that time that were just being introduced to this. Sorry, I kind of went on a rant there.
No, dude, you couldn't have summed it up any better, really. I think that's kind of one of my intentions, when I wanted to introduce you to some of those text-based games like Zork and things, is to realize that I hope that sent that message to you, that even though these things are incredibly basic, we could see that in the future they were going to be better. And
Like,
you
the
know, you
world is
wanted to be a
changing.
part of that. And like, you also think back to like what it's like being a kid. I mean, you know, you're growing up, and like maybe you're not having a great day or a bad week, or your girlfriend didn't go right. Like, you had this world that you could go to that was kind of yours. Like, it was separate from your parents. Like, and you know, maybe the issues they were having, like, I mean, we're all human.
Mhm.
And so it was an escape for me to go in there and get on that thing and get into that world of Zork, even though like there were no like shiny graphics. Like, it was a world that, you know, I think there's this way that our brains work where if we're sitting still, like there's something I think they call the default mode network, where we start worrying about the future and things. But when you're in that game and like, it's kind of, you've got this character, like all you're thinking about is that you're in the here and now. Like, it kind of snaps you back into that moment. And, you know, I think just the excitement of that, like, made you put up with a lot of the hardware problems, or the, you know, the bugginess of it all, or the fact that the game might not load. I think you're exactly right. There's a whole vibe here that you kind of, you know, just you can't really recreate in this day. Like there's tons of differences and things like that, and I think that's one of the reasons it's important that we go back and look at these things. Is you know, not only for myself, that it just had those special memories and kind of you know, planted a seed for the rest of my life, but that yeah, it was a like think about the things that kids do these days. Like when a new app or something comes out, like it's like, you know, I remember when Facebook even came out, like, you know, like it was very shortly that you saw that the younger kids, once they saw the old folks on there, they wanted something new, you know, and boy, this computing thing, like it was all young people. You didn't see old people doing it. And like, so it was already that kind of world that you could sort of immerse yourself in and be an individual. And, yeah.
You mentioned something important there, and about it mostly being for the kids. And what in the research here, and I'm going to kind of be the research nerd in this episode, and we'll lean on ChukTomoahawk for real life experience and nostalgic moments. But what I noticed is when Jack Tramiel, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, to be honest with you, which sounds like one heck of a guy, man. Like, this guy has some story, man. Holocaust survivor, emigrated from Europe. He's Polish, came over here and started kicking ass and taking names, man. But yeah, he created the Commodore International, and they, you know, they started off with like typewriters and calculators, I think, and stuff like that in the 70s. And then I think they actually bought Atari at some point. They bought Atari Inc. at some point. I saw in an article there. You know, if you want to double check that online, you can. But I think I saw that there, and they created a Atari International, I think, or Atari Corporation. It was something the variant there. And they also created, they purchased a company called Moss Technology, I think, or something, Moss something, which was
the folks that were making the chip.
The computer chips, which was a huge important thing we'll touch on. But you mentioned adults and kids, and it mostly being for kids, but they did, it looks like, have kind of like, they projected selling this stuff to offices, to corporate, to other folks for, you know, having database, saving database numbers for office applications, you know, office applications and stuff like that. But it looks like where it really, really made its mark, especially because of that SID chip, which gave it sound, good sound. It really just didn't flourish in those sectors like it did with young gamers, which is what you're describing with all the youngsters being the main consumers of the Commodore 64.
That's interesting because,
like, they did want to get it into the offices, and they did. You know, it did, but really where it shined was with the video games.
Yeah, and you know, as we're sitting here talking about that, I think about like my experiences, say, being at the office of the Forest Service, and although we had some, you know, fairly nice computers that the government provided us, Typically, what I find is that in any office setting that I've been in, there's usually like an IT department of sorts that really knows the system, and that's who the folks go to. And then there might be some person in the office that kind of as a hobby or whatever is into it, or does it in their personal life or something, that you go to for information. And so it isn't exactly like the whole office just embraces it, sort of like and so I don't know exactly why that might have been, but I will say that, like, I think my impression is that as kids who had this in 1980, in the future, we were going to be those IT people and that go-to guy at the office. And that's what I was for a really long time. It does pass you eventually again. Like I felt like toward the end of my career, I was not good at that. But when I was doing graphic information systems, like GIS maps for the government, like, I got way into it there for a while. There's this Esri software I got sent to Ohio to this class 4 that makes maps that's incredibly deep. And so,
that's kind of like what we were talking about earlier about you being a part of the system and the Commodore 64 only being as good as you could make it. Right? So
you had some limitations like that for sure, but like I say, you kind of sensed that it was going to be better in the future. It made it exciting. It kind of, like we were pointing out, like this first smaller versions of home computers, like something I could fit in my own, bedroom there. So there was a ton of excitement. That's why that folks were willing to pay that big price for it. And, I think it's why folks are still excited about it today, really. But
there's a cool article from The Verge. I think it was published back in 2012. Yep, 2012, and it touches on that aspect of being a part of the use of it and making it, learning how to program with it. It says here, there was a comforting sense that your machine was exactly as useful as you could make it. Quote, since learning how to use a home computer was the same as learning how to program it, operating a Commodore 64 in many ways meant achieving a kind of intimacy, beyond merely recalling memory tables and knowing the various rituals for loading programs without error. Instead of an operating system, there was a blue-flavored BASIC terminal, and the BASIC is the name of the operating system, I guess, even though it wasn't like an operating system we know today.
But looks a lot like DOS, MS-DOS today.
Yes, exactly. Reading on, it says, and the comforting sense that your machine was exactly as useful as you could make it, without the convention-guided rails of a modern OS. The C64 was one of the last brightest moments of the DIY computer, do-it-yourself computer. Yeah. So that's really cool.
I found it incredibly interesting that I heard some like article kind of comparing it to the Raspberry Pi, this thing that I've saw like used in that Mr. Robot show. Have you ever watched Mr. Robot?
No.
It's a pretty popular sitcom or not sitcom, but a drama about the hackers. And it's kind of like there's another thing called a rubber ducky, I think is kind of like a USB port that I can use to attack your system. But a Raspberry Pi is kind of like a computer that's really small. And I've heard comparisons back to the Commodore 64 today. Like it's kind of, open like that in some ways. I don't know enough about it to like articulate or talk intelligently about it, but there's kind of a comparison there that I saw.
What do you mean by attack your system?
Like, say if I have some nefarious purpose, like I want to get some information that you have on your computer, maybe I tell you like, hey, I've got this new game, like check it out, and I hand you that USB port. It'll have that game you want on there, but it's also got some malware that's going to go in there and attack your system. Like, get that information that I want and maybe send it to me over the internet or.
Was that similar though to the Commodore 64, or how are you relating it? I don't understand.
I think how how, like I say, we're at this DOS prompt, like that basic language doesn't have a window, like a user interface, like you're already in there and
I
you're
see.
kind of at that place, like where if you wanted to manipulate things that you could, because loading it, and the only thing you can do there, like if you're going to copy a disk, you've got to tap like format colon I mean, there's a whole ton of commands like that are, you got to know what you're doing. I mean,
Oh, and maybe I think I know what you mean. Like, is that when you have a system like that, there's a lot more accessibility. Like
there's back doors and
like
things.
you're already looking into the heart of the computer when you see that. Yeah.
Getting in there and, manipulating things. And, I think there was already, like from movies and things, that's how people kind of imagine the future. Like that really smart kid that was in there, hacking away. And, yeah, I found that like to be one of the frustrating parts about the system, but also one of the exciting parts. It did kind of, when you had the manual, you had like all these type programs. It was almost like a water paint by numbers type thing. Like I didn't have to have the brain power to figure out the program. I just had to type it in. But while you were doing that, you were learning so much about how they worked. And, it just was a little bit different than how I interact with my computer today when I use the Windows interface.
Definitely.
So, I know I'm kind of jumping around here. I want to make sure we're kind of getting the basics, and definitely want to deliver the who, what, and that kind of thing about the Commodore.
Well, we know it's a 8-bit computer, and it stood out, I think, because of two things that we haven't really sorry. The MOS chip, the two things that we haven't really touched on are the MOS chip and the SID chip, which were, according to what I was able to research, were really the two items that kept it competitive, that kept it like a little bit above the other platforms that were out at the time, because none of the other platforms or computers or systems could really compete with the sound and the color and the processing power of those chips, which made it.
Because I want to say on the VIC-28 that the sound and the chip were one thing, and once they went to the Commodore, it split into two things, which opened up some doors for them. As far as the waveforms and how they could make sound. And we talked about that, like the sound on the Atari, like we, in our last, or maybe the cheat code episode even, we talked about how, in the beginning, like it was a big deal to hear them say, "You're out" versus, yeah. And, and then remember the thing I told you about the B-17 bomber game, like the IntelliVoice that went with the Intellivision, like kind of was a separate SID of sorts like this, so it was a big deal, like what you could do. And like, wow, you can find, like, people are still writing music for this thing, dude. Like, and like today's games are incredibly complicated, and you just got to remark it, like what kind of patience someone must have, like to program that, because I'm sure it doesn't go right the first time.
Yeah, it had the.
It's got to be some trial and error in there. Like, I mean, music is kind of weird anyway. Like, I mean, we talk about it in theories. Like, we don't say, like, this is exactly why this sounds good. Like, that's, like, human beings objectively decide that for themselves. Like, so.
Oh, I think it's a genre in its own, and the Commodore 64 clearly had, it created that, and it had something to do in the creation of that. But it looks like the CPU was the MOS 6510, and they also had an 8500, or maybe that's the same thing. But it's the MOS chip 6510, and it clocked at 1.023 megahertz on the NTSC version, which is the US, and then at 0.985 megahertz in the PAL version, which was the UK one. 64 kilobyte memory. So that's exactly 65,536 bytes. That's really good. And then it had a 20 KB ROM. Graphics, VIC-2, 16 colors, sprites, and I don't know what this is, but a raster interrupt. And then the sound chip, which was a huge one, the SID 6581. Had 3 oscillators, 4 wave formats, filters, ADSR. It was one of a kind.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see how that really opens up a lot, like for interaction with the game, and you know, it's the cutting edge at that point. So yeah, I just kind of want to make sure I'm not leaving. You know, I feel like we have the folks here at Commodore 64 and Jack Tremble. They I think some folks worked together there in New York, and maybe they took things to Toronto, and I think eventually there's like some home offices in Pennsylvania for the Commodore folks, and this MOS chip was kind of what once they split that chip into 2 parts, like kind of opened up the door, and one of their sort of motto or why they did it is it was computers for the masses, not the classes. And the way I take that statement is to mean that this isn't just for rich people. Like, we want, the middle class to be able to have access to this. And you can see how this is an important moment, because I would say somewhere out there, some of the games that you and I have played today, like some of the programmers or whatnot, this probably was their first computer, and that was their first, introduction to that. And they didn't have to be the children of rich kids. Like, it could be anybody pretty much that got their hands on one of these. And, I think anytime that we get those new ideals and diversity into a system like that, you see good things, and you can kind of trace those back.
I'm sure the Commodore 64 still comes up in classes for programmers and the like.
Yeah.
You better believe it. For learning how to program.
They've made some kind of modification for it where you can tweet from it. Imagine sending that out.
Well, what else, Tomahawk? What else do you got for us on this thing? Any other...
I did want to talk about the peripherals just a little bit. Like there are a ton of peripherals for this thing. I can speak to the fact that I had a printer and I had 2 floppy disk drives, and I mean you were pretty much shitting in high cotton if you had 2 disk drives. Like, you were the main, like, I don't even know how that worked. Like, I must have had some kind of divider, because there's only 1 port for it on the computer. There must have been some kind of splitter or something that probably had to come with it.
I think so.
Separately.
I think so, because they also had, like, there was an original disk drive, and then they had a couple of variants come out, like, newer editions, where on the back of it there was like a little switch thing you could hit with a screwdriver to separate, to distinguish the 2 inputs, and that way, it wouldn't conflict.
And the other thing I had was a printer. And I do want to point out that this was the time in printers when it had the perforated little holes on the side. Like, there was this gear that sort of drove that shit. And
had to pull the paper out because...
Dude, you might as well have started a Harley in your room, too, when you fired that printer up. Because it was like... and, like, every page was connected together. And I have memories of these printers, like too. It was incredible. The paper was expensive. Like I remember being at school and like printing something out, and the teacher being like, who the hell did this? Like, because there were always situations like, you would think you were just printing a page and you end up printing a whole book or something, and like,
it'd go like...
It might be like $1 down the drain today, but back in those days, it was a lot of money down the drain. But it also was cool as crap that you had that. I just remember one of the first things I did is I think my dad was writing down all the serial numbers on like important things that he had or something like that if they were ever stolen. And like I remember sitting at my computer without a spreadsheet or anything, just slowly typing those into this basic sort of word processing program that came on the computer on the C64 there. And but man, when you produced that thing and handed it off, like you felt like somebody, like you had done something. And also one of the other, just kind of again looking at input devices and whatnot. There was one of the first GPS systems where it was on this. They called it the car positioning system. I think I never did quite understand exactly how that worked or how you would apply it, but. I think you're seeing a lot of forerunners here. There was a music synthesizer type thing that you could put on there. One of the things that I think would be interesting to talk about is the modem experience. This is something that I can't, for the life of me, remember who I was calling or what information I was getting. I want to say there was something called CompuServe.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember sitting at the dining table, and I had brought the phone over on this really long cord, and I had like the old landline type phone, and I would have to sit the receiver down in this cradle that sent that as we were mentioning earlier, kind of the weird kind of noises, where the touch tone noises are made into the phone there. And like some of the memories I have of it is that it tied up the phone line. So, instantly my dad would be trying to use the phone, and he'd be like, "John, you on the computer?" Yeah.
I'm upstairs. That's what Theo Vaughn always says. I'm upstairs.
Oh my God. That was a trademark of living in my house growing up, is my parents having a conversation like with each other from opposite ends of the house, and somehow drawing me into it. But I don't have a ton of other, like, as far as the car positioning systems. I think a lot of these things were fairly obscure as far as the amount of distribution of them. But I think it also kind of points out that because you have this access to the sort of inner workings of things, it was easy for folks to invent and make new things and innovate, which I think we're kind of reaping the benefits of at this point in time.
Man. And are you familiar with any of these other inputs on here, or what did you describe them as? Expansions? Or because there's a ton of things on this list here. Peripherals.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I just bumped the mic. But yeah, there's a ton of different things on here that catch my eye, like the hand scanners, the teletext, the daisy wheel, the dot matrix. I'm super curious what all of these expansions were, or how they worked and what they did.
Yeah, I see an Apple II emulation box, and but I think most folks had either the tape drive or the floppy drive, and a printer at the most.
Joystick, maybe a joystick action.
Joystick. One question I tried to ask myself is, I feel like my Atari joystick fit this thing. I'm pretty sure that's what I had. I have this memory of playing Centipede. And I think I shared with you before, I was jamming out to Sammy Hagar, I Can't Drive 55, and playing with my headset and had my Centipede going. And I'm pretty sure that memory, I've got the Atari joystick plugged into the old Commodore there playing.
Yeah,
I know it had 2 ports.
Yeah, that makes sense, and those were standard ports.
Uh-huh.
So I think you could even grab one of those old Sega controllers from the first Sega system. What was the name of the first one? It came before the Genesis. Was it the Master System? The Sega Master System?
Right, yeah.
I think those controllers as well could plug into, the back of that bad boy.
Yeah.
Because it was those old school, those big ass ports, with the metal spikes and the prongs and everything, and you'd have to screw
7 or 8.
Yeah, you screw them in. God, that's so old. And I think another thing that made the Commodore 64 stand out was that you could have both the RF modulator thing for the TVs, but it also had the for color, I forget the name of it, man. The one that has the 3 cables.
Oh, the composite. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you could choose between both, and that was another thing that made it stand out.
And man, I don't know that I feel like those monitors were more for businesses, like kind of how you mentioned, because I think my buddy Chris Lambert had one of these at home, and I think he was using the same TV kind of situation like I was, and those monitors had to be incredibly expensive. I do see that like they're sought after today. Like if you're going to go back and play retro games, if you can find some of those early monitors. I saw someone had got some from like a TV station that had upgraded all their stuff, and they still had some of that old stuff around. But like you're talking about the best CRT tube type TVs. I know the Sony Triniton flat screen is kind of one of the ones that gets brought up for retro gaming a lot. But
yeah, man. And hell, baby, if you only got that RF modulator, you screw that bad boy on the back of your TV, throw it on channel 3 or channel 4, and you're going, baby.
Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of color to things, so it didn't really matter to me that much that it was a black and white TV. But one thing I want to mention that, as we're kind of wrapping up the vital information about what this is and where it came from and whatnot is I like how it says ready right there, right at that prompt. It says ready, like, and you kind of made the comment earlier of like, you're in there behind the scenes and it's kind of up to you to make it happen. And
yeah, it basically says, how do you want to take over the world, human?
Yeah.
Ready.
It's like, whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
Oh man,
that's what that prompt felt like. Like there's just tons of possibilities there. Like I could either, write a game about space invaders, or I could hack into,
yeah, and like
with this modem here, I could call the Pentagon, and God knows what I could get into. That's the way the movies portrayed it at that time. I don't think
absolutely.
It's like that.
No, but it was all a reflection of the times, man.
Yeah, because when you see the movie thing from back in the day, like when someone's hacking into something, it's almost like it's a video game inside of their mainframe or something. The guy's like opening a door, like he's literally opening a door, and like I don't think that's what it's like, but I do remember you would hear him talk about like back doors into programs, like things that programmers had left for their access. It kind of very similar to how we saw the origin of cheat codes, like whereas you were play testing something, you might have to go back into it.
Oh yeah,
like a lot of programmers in these games were like they left what they would call a back door, and I remember learning about that a little bit at school, even in computer classes that we had at the time, and yeah, so like I do feel like there's a little more of a behind the scenes access here.
When you chose this topic and started looking into it, man, I remember in our cheat code episode we talked a bunch about pokes and peeks, which are basically these base commands. I'm not no BS. I didn't fully wrap my mind around it until we started looking into the Commodore 64, because I'd go and watch videos of like the top games, little bit of history on it and stuff, and there'd be a lot of imagery where you could see where it literally said, like the guy was like typing in like poke, POKE, and then this like long code or algorithm or whatever, and then he just continued typing in and was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I get it, the peaks and the pokes. I mean, it's that it's that mind, that young mind or whatever, just programming into that basic 2.0. And basic, for fellow MPC listeners, is basically just like the command system that it was running on. It was actually a Microsoft product. If you look into it, if you go back enough, you'll see that it's actually a Microsoft product that Commodore used as their, we'll call it their quote unquote their operating system. But if you, if you can throw it up on Google, Just look for Basic 2.0 or Commodore 64 Basic 2.0 and go into Images, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. Just a blue screen, and I think it says on the top, like, welcome to Basic 2.0 or something like that, and then it should say 65,000 plus kilobytes available, and then, I think it says ready, right? It just says ready, and then there's a little flashing square. And that little flashing square is kind of like the, ooh.
That's where you come in.
Now what do we do?
Yeah. It's a different feeling than I get when I power up the old PlayStation there nowadays. Like, I kind of, I feel like there's an application that's sort of doing all this for me once I open that up. But it's different now when you boot up your PC or your laptop. It's everything that you could possibly want to use or deal with is right there, easy to access, just click of a button, it's up. Yeah. You don't feel as involved with the process of that program. You don't feel like you're making the program run anymore. It's just all running for you. It's made simplified. And I never really got that feeling again. Like maybe a couple times in my Forest Service career. There's a program that was written by a guy here in Asheville, actually, called V-Smoke. It actually models how smoke will behave from a prescribed burn. And I worked with that guy enough. Like, and one day he was like, saying something about the GUI that he had developed for that program, and I was like, I tried to act like I knew what he was talking about, and then I went home and Googled GUI or whatever, and that stands for Graphical User Interface. And so, he had all of this spreadsheet, like math type stuff going on behind there, but he had to create something for people like me to put in the parameters, like the weather that I was getting that day, like how fast the wind was blowing, so it kind of clued me into that and let me see back behind that for just a second and made me realize how smart that dude was. And then also, it kind of reminded me of back with this Commodore access, and I think there's a connection there today to like I say, these, maybe some of the tools that are used in hacking to this date. But I think it's important before we move on just to point out that there are still peripherals and games being made for this today. This is already some years back, not to jump into the games yet, but Prince of Persia was from 2011. Yeah. Yeah. That really surprised me. I guess I expected somewhere there was somebody, maybe retro gaming or whatever, but I see an incredible sort of interest and community kind of that's still out there for this thing, and it makes me excited about it.
Well, have you ever dabbled with any of the predecessors or successors of the Commodore 64? We're talking here about what would be, out of its predecessors, we got the Commodore PET and then the Commodore VIC-20, both popular. And then after our Commodore 64, there was not after, but kind of like during and after, in 1982, they released a Commodore Max in Japan. Later on in 83, they released the Educator 64, which I think was, relatively popular. It wasn't out, there wasn't that many out there. I think they did it to attempt to compete with the Apple II's hold on the U.S. education market. It's from the Wikipedia. I was reading that because there was a lot of apples all over in the schools. I think that was one of the systems I played Oregon Trail on back in my ute.
Same here. I feel like our school, and I saw some information that was kind of like once schools kind of went that way, like once they realized the Apple was a little more user-friendly as far as that went, they had a hard time kind of getting that market back, and really didn't really see a lot of success in schools after that.
Yeah, which is interesting because the Apple II, from what I've gathered here, from what I've read, it was so user friendly almost to a default, because it didn't there wasn't like that much that it could do. And that's why the Commodore 64 kind of was actually very competitive and arguably more popular, sold more. I don't know if that's the case, but you know, they made their mark because of the fact that there was just so much more peripherals, so much more accessibility as a programmer. Like you made the system run. You know, you made it everything that it could be. Where on an Apple II, you couldn't necessarily do that. So you got a lot more bang for your buck with that $595. But in regard to the educational scenario, you know, the classroom, Apple was already in. You know, they'd already gotten in there.
I see that still going on to this day, like sort of a philosophy behind both companies. Like when I compare Android to iOS, like people that use their Android phones, like typically they're a little harder to use in the very beginning, but once you kind of figure things out, you can highly customize it more so than the Apple iPhone. But the Apple iPhone, almost any person like with any ability can pick up and use it right from the very beginning.
Yep.
But it doesn't go as I think that takes away some of the customability to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty good analogy for what was going on right here.
Maybe
like that Apple II.
And adding on to that, because I've had both phones, and I ended up going back to the Apple phone because I just felt like it was more reliable. Like maybe not as customizable, and you know, I couldn't like run two screens at the same time, or you know, there was no little stylus pen on the one that I had on the, you know, there was a stylus pen on the Samsung I had. But anyways, the iPhone was always more reliable in many regards.
And I think that carries over into the same analogy. It's like I've never had a virus on my iMac, but I sure do get them on other things. I haven't so much with the latest iterations, but kind of the Windows before that. Like I constantly had to be running some sort of virus protection.
You got to stay away from those dirty websites, man.
Oh, dang it. It was for research purposes only.
Star Trek ladies uncovered. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
The real last frontier.
Oh, gosh. So, you know, okay, and then after the Commodore Educator 64, they released in 83 what looks like a portable Commodore 64 called the SX64. Has the distinction of being the first commercial full-color portable computer. While earlier computers using this form factor only incorporate monochrome green screen displays, the base SX64 unit features a 5-inch color cathode ray tube CRT and one integrated 1541 floppy disk drive. Man, I don't think they sold too many of these though.
No, and I feel like those were the things that probably did get marketed more to like electronic stores than say the electronics department at a department store.
Yeah,
and that was probably one of the things that until we did this research, I really hadn't heard of them because of that.
Yep. Yeah, that was Commodore did well by getting their product into the retail stores, into those big department stores.
Oh yeah.
And television did that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why they were able to sell so many units. Both of these companies.
Yeah, I think at times like you can see where, you know, like in that Intellivision thing, like you saw like CEOs kind of get in there and they made some decisions about when to release things and stuff like that based on money, and it kind of hurt things. But here's a situation where, you know, that larger distribution network, even though the Commodore probably had to tailor it to fit that, it did, you know, make it end up in my room, which it never would have, you know, if it hadn't. So,
well, whatever they did, they survived the game crash of 82, 83.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you know,
I think like, yeah, it was kind of an uncertain market, and, you know, you could probably see how investors and things like that maybe because of a possible lack of interest in consoles or the market being saturated with them. Maybe they're going this opposite direction, of the PC. It's kind of the beginning of that market. But I think you bring up a good point with that.
Well, I think just, Trammell, Jack Trammell and his people, I think they just made smart choices. They I don't know if this is accurate. I saw it and read it in another article, but I think it costs them around like $150, less than $150 to manufacture a Commodore 64, and then to turn around
I didn't see that.
Yeah, and then to turn around and sell it for $5.95. At least in the initial market release. Those are good. That seems like a good margin, of cost and then sale price.
Well, and then to have all those peripherals that they're going to need to buy. I mean, you've kind of created a market there for yourself and a sustainable future for your company. So that had to feel pretty good, because they were letting a lot of money slip through their hands with the software.
That is a good segue.
Yeah.
Software.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Like I say, I definitely feel like we've covered pretty good. What this thing is and where it came from and whatnot and why, and that kind of leads us into the next thing that I think it'd be good to talk about would be the software and maybe touch on some of the games that I actually played for this system. But what I started to mention there about the software is that if you had 2 of these floppy disk drives, there wasn't a lot stopping me from you stopping by and saying, "Hey man, I like this Dig Dug. I'd like to have a copy of that for me myself." And I'd be like, "Well, don't you worry, little tiger, I got you." And I'd whip out my disk drives, and we had a blank disc, that we'd had to purchase there at the Kmart, and like I said, I'd have to get that manual out and look at those. I'd have to format your disc first to receive it. Yep. And that took some doing, but once we got that done, you might leave there with a copy of that game for free.
No, and gosh, dude, those floppy disks were classic, man. I just, like, whenever I see a picture of one of those old floppy disks, it brings back so many memories. And I bet you there's tons of younger gamers that don't even know like what those are.
Oh yeah,
have no clue.
Yeah, no idea. Because very shortly they were replaced by the smaller, not floppy disk.
I think the 3-inch. I think it was like the 3-inch one. But the first ones were massive, and you could fan a pharaoh with those bad boys.
yeah. You could keep yourself cool through a
Bring
church
me
service.
2 floppy disk, and for the pharaoh. Cooling them off, eating them grapes.
I'll eat my grapes from them.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah, that was a whole different time. But being able to do that, and did you see any of the information about where, like, once they, like, game makers started trying to stop this? Like, I think there's a game called maybe Dr. J and Larry Bird. Like, they sent you this, it almost looked like a decoder ring or something. Like, you've got this little cardboard thing, and you had to line up all these things to get your specific code that went with your version of the game.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, there's like an up, down, and then a left to right, and they'd ask you, like, please enter the first or whatever digits appear, and then you'd have to. Yeah, they came up. One of them was like a spinning wheel, like a color coded.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, is that the one you're talking about? Sorry, my bad. My bad. Yeah.
Which is fairly interesting because at some point, there was this thing when I was in grade school. It was called the TAG program that this local community college had, and you could go there, like, it didn't count towards your regular school, but kind of as an extra thing. You could go there, and I did. Like, and I went and took this computer class there, and the very first day of the computer class, they handed us out these punch cards. And they showed us what the first computers looked like, and they were actually like mechanical. You had this card, and it had all these different places that things could be punched on it, almost like in a spreadsheet. And when they would run them through this mechanical thing, where a hole was at in that thing, caused it to register a number on what you would actually call the computer that had no electrical parts. It's just a mechanical thing, and so. And the reason they showed us that, as I assume, was to kind of teach us that that's exactly what's happening in this ones and zeros, this binary system, like that is the that creates the language of this computer. It's like a step even deeper than, say, if the GUI, the interface is what, we're looking through our window now, and then you have the computer language behind it. But this kind of showed like where that language, kind of got its starts, or what,
That's cool.
enabled them. Yeah, I found that really interesting. And these little decoder things that they sent with that they reminded me of them. And I bet like programmers at that time were exposed to those on a regular basis. Well,
they had to do whatever they could, I guess, to slow
they
down
used
the
kind of a technology that they knew of sorts to do that. But those were few and far between, and I think further on into the 80s as things went on, they got more and more elaborate. And just like you see with, like, when I buy a version of Windows today, I've got a code I got to put in off the back of it there.
I just don't think they had they didn't have the tech yet, or the know-how to prevent copywriting, really. I mean, there was no way to,
No.
that's part of what, like I was describing earlier, is this was still a very new world, even for the very own people that were creating these devices.
Absolutely. And I don't know that it had been decided yet that you shouldn't be able to make a copy of it after you bought it. I mean,
I think they did in the legal world. In the legal world, there was, limitations there because, one of the games I wanted to mention is called the Great Giana Sisters, which is
it's like
clearly a copy of Mario. It's so obvious, man.
I agree with you that the precedent, like the cases probably existed or whatever, like you couldn't like go take a Boston record and copy it and put their same songs out. Like the precedent that creative things like this were property were there, but as far as the laws being on the books, like had there been a case like where it had been applied to this computer technology, like I'd say if there was, it hadn't happened a lot. It's kind of like you see today where we're trying to catch up with social media. Like is it against the law for me to slander you on social media? Like, yeah, that's probably wrong, but is there a law against it already? Like, maybe not, so.
Yeah, I'm actually looking it up right now. There's what is it called? There it is, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. When did this come into force? The Digital Millennium Copyright Act is a United States copyright law that implements two 1996 treaties. Okay, so I'm not familiar with the U.S. With U.S. law. I'm definitely not knowledgeable about any of that. But if this Digital Millennium Copyright Act also covers gaming and like gaming titles and gaming licensing and everything like that, I'm sure it has very broad language and covers everything. But if that's the case, it looks like, this is all coming out in 1996, 1998, way after.
Yeah, you're like 10 years from it.
So maybe there was just a whole running of the muck of game copying and actual game developers. Because it's one thing for like me to go over to Tomahawk's house back in the 80s and him like, hey, man, I'll trade you, let's see here, that 1984 Ghostbusters if you get me on a date with your sister. Hell yeah, bro. And you just copy it right there. You just plug in the Commodore 64, start copying the game, and then I'm off and I'm stoked because I just got a brand new game for free. That's one thing. But for companies, developers to go out and be like, well, Mario's already got its licensing there, but we want to make this game anyways. Screw it. We'll make it and call it the Great Giana Sisters. And then they go and make a game that's clearly like stealing their stuff. That's different. That's a whole other level right there. And that was happening all over.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there was sort of, like we saw with the Intellivision, like kind of, it was like people wanting to cash in on this, like how they sold their rights, like for Tandyvision to make that clone of theirs in the games, was one of the things that led to that crash of 1983, is that it sort of let the quality go out the window, and it it saturated the market in some ways. But I, like in your first example of like you being over at my house wanting this game, I could also see how that if I had paid for the game, like I might want to make an extra copy of it, like just to back it up, like a backup copy or something. Like you know, you can see how like, you know, I might be angry. Like we're used to that today. Like I know I can't backup copy my version of Ark or whatever, and you know, and I'm definitely not going to make one that I can share with you or whatever. But
Yeah.
In those days, that hadn't really been established yet, in my opinion.
Maybe that's why now, when you turn a game on, you'll see at the very bottom it says like any unauthorized use, distribution, copying, whatever of this game, trademark or anything's related, and there'll be like a whole long list is strictly prohibited and can be, you know, sanctioned under the law. That's probably why that comes up now, is because of all the Commodore copyright, like all that stuff going on back then. I mean, not just with Commodore, you know, I'm not putting it on Commodore, but, you know, I mean, there's something to be said when you look at the numbers and they say that if you add up all of the office applications, database applications, and video games, there's over 10,000, you know, forms of software. Yeah. So there's over like basically, you know, if you collect them all, you'll have about 10,000 floppy disks sitting there on your desk there. Yeah, that's so many games. That's crazy.
Dude, I think the Nintendo had like maybe 900 games or something total, or something like in its whole history of the NES system, the first NES system. Yeah. So 10,000 games.
I mean, it's not just games. Like there's some office applications there, database collecting programs, but yeah, the vast majority. Let's just say half. Let's say 5,000, just for shits and giggles. 5,000. That's so, like, if you go online and like watch videos about the Commodore 64, these people are buying them on like Craigslist and eBay and like specialty online stores and stuff, and they'll just go and buy like a box of games for like $5-10, and you'll get a whole box filled with Commodore 64 games that are still in their floppy. You know, if you get lucky, you can find them with manuals still, or those like don't copy wheels and decipherers, so that you're getting an original product and everything. It's awesome, man.
You find people's taxes in there.
He's a little income tax return from 1986. Like, what? Damn, this person broke as hell. Why are they buying Commodore? No, I'm just kidding.
You make $20,000 a year?
Well, hell, that was probably good money back then, right?
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah, it was different, and I kind of miss that in some ways. That like as we've kind of gone back and explored this, one of the things I realized is because of these numbers that we're talking about, 10,000 applications, like everyone's experience with this thing is different. Like I've discovered from my research, like that my experience, like I didn't play the best games for this thing, and I think it's interesting that we point out at this time, like 1985, I think was the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'm pretty sure I went and started gaming down there in the living room. I left the bedroom where this Commodore was set up, and I never went back. Like maybe to use the word processor or whatever, and like kind of visit this game that if my friend came over that also had one or whatever. But we would rather be playing Kung Fu on the NES. Like,
yeah, I mean, that thing, gosh, the NES was, no, we don't want to talk about that right now. We'll probably have a whole episode on the NES, but it changed the game.
Well, simplified it. I think for me, like this, the console versus PC battle was over as quick as it began. Like it, you know, I think in my mind, I wanted to be on my console. Like I'm not having to type load and I'm not having all these problems, and it was way more accessible, and it had the titles that were in the arcade, and you know, not that those didn't exist on the Commodore, but it just wasn't available to me. But So my experience with this thing was some of the first games for it. I feel like, you know, before it got into what it became, like I played these text-based games that, you know, I felt like kind of, as I pointed out earlier, it kind of showed just how rudimentary and how like thirst for this outlet and this new world that I was. Like, I was willing to sit there and like
spend hours
play this,
trying to figure out Zork 1.
Did you get a chance to play a little bit of that emulator?
Yeah, I did, man. But
how far did you make it into the house is my question.
Fuck no, dude. I read the leaflet. I got to the leaflet part, read it, and then I was in the yard, and I tried opening the door, but it was sealed, like boarded up. And I kept typing in commands, trying to figure out like what do I do from here? I read the leaflet. The door's locked. I'm in the yard west of the house. And dude, and I just like, geez, like I keep typing in words. I'd be like, okay, use like I don't remember what I put. I put something in to like try and get the door open, but it kept coming up saying like, I do not know the word whatever, or I do not know the word so and so. And eventually I just said like, man, I could see how it's in, like I am tempted to go back because I want to get into the house somehow. And I can see how for a text-based game, they did a really amazing job of creating that that mystery that in our monkey brains we need to resolve. We need to solve the mystery. We need to solve the puzzle. And it's a fascinating interface. I'm not going to lie. I was a little like, when you said, well, you got to try it first before we hit record and we talk about the Commodore 64, you got to try Zork. You also mentioned it was in that Big Bang Theory episode.
Yeah, I think it's one of Sheldon's favorite games. He mentions it. It's I think they have a retro gaming night, and everyone's they're picking, and he's like trying to make the case for Zork.
That's a hard case to make, brother.
Exactly. Oh, man. It's like I wanted to go retro, not like 1800s. Like, you might as well be playing Where's My Pouch?
Life without butter over here.
Like,
I did try it, but I quickly was like, okay, I don't know what else to type. But I honestly jumped on there because I wanted to see what you were talking about more than I wanted to authentically get into it and like thoroughly play the game. I will jump on there again because I do want to at least get a little bit further, because it's for the listening NPCs out there. You got that blue screen that we were talking about. Of course, you load the game, and then it comes up, and it just kind of it just says west of the house, and it describes like where you are standing, and it says that you're standing kind of like to the west of I think it's the White House.
It is a White House.
White House. Okay. Yeah, it's just and this is all in a text, and it just says you're here, you're at this place, and you're standing by this thing, and then it says like there's like a prompt, and that little box is flashing, and it says, "What do you want to do?" Mm-hmm. And all you can do is type stuff in. Mm-hmm. All you can do, and it says, and it says that there's like a mailbox. Mm-hmm. So like the first thing I typed was, okay, well there's a house, I'm standing in a yard, and there's a mailbox, and I just put open mailbox. And it says the mailbox has been opened. There is a leaflet. And it just, that's how the game kind of starts to advance. So
it's your first shot of dopamine right there. It's like I made this thing move.
Right in there, baby. Spanking in there. Yeah. And I got my little hit of Zork 1.
And one of the things that blows me away about it is that it's really hard. Like I will throw this out for you. If you go back, like you can type the directions like north, N, W, E, and S, and it'll send you in that direction. And you can type L, and it'll look around again. It'll kind of like assess where you're at again. It'll describe where you're at again. And sometimes you can get some information from that. And you will ultimately find that there's a window in the back of the house that you can interact with. But I remember getting into the house originally, like this is just how weird this game is. Like it's hard as shit to do anything, but one of the ways that you can get into the house is that you push that leaflet under the door, and you like I think it maybe even says something that you can see a key in the lock from the inside, like an old timey lock where the key kind of like the older kind of key. So you poke something in there, and that key falls out and hits the leaflet, and you pull it back out and get the key. And like it's that complicated, but yet, you type in like pickup key and it says, I don't know the word pickup.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just like, what the fuck?
How can you not know the words pick and up?
Yeah, it just, and I find too, like, I would love to have a map for it. Like, I'm sure it exists out there. I think it would take away a lot of the thing. But what I remember doing is drawing a map as I was playing it. Like, I had a piece of paper out, and I started mapping all that stuff out. Kind of like if I go north, it says eventually, the forest, you need a machete to pass through the forest here,
Well, that's crazy because, like, and the text-based games, there's a few of them. There's a few of them that were on the Commodore 64, but when you look at like one of the later games released in 1993, it's called there's one called Mayhem in Monsterland. The graphics on that thing are remarkable. The color usage, the sounds. I mean, if you can check it out, you can pull it up on Google, and if you look at Zork 1 versus or Planetfall, which I think is another game that you played. These are just bare bones games, text based. And then you go and look at like Mayhem and Monsterland, 1993. When was that? That was when released. Was when that was released. Huge difference. Whole universe of difference.
There's still, like, in my opinion, like with that 8-bit graphics, I remember like trying to draw stuff with that, and like it always had something that was missing. Like, yeah, I see like where people have used that today and they're making these awesome graphics, but it's always like, something would be out of proportion. Like the guy's head would be too big for his body or something would be out of whack. And I think for me, like, one of the things I'd like to point out is I think one of the reasons I don't know much about those games is just I would look at them and I would think, I'd rather be playing the Nintendo, and I just, that wasn't where my my yard mowing money went. Like it was.
Yeah, well, I think the NES, it came ready to go, man. So it cut out a lot of the struggle.
Yeah.
If you can have more pleasure, less struggle. Unfortunately, we're wired to find the path of least resistance, and that isn't necessarily always the best thing. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing in the case of Nintendo. I mean, the Nintendo was a great platform, the original NES. So I don't think anyone's gonna throw blame at you there for preferring the NES over the Commodore 64. But I guess what I find amazing is that. And this ties back into what I was saying about it being a brand new world for programmers and gamers and enthusiasts, and even the own people that were creating these things. Was no one had any idea of what that little machine was going to be capable of. And you have games like Zork 1 that was actually released before the Commodore 64 came out. I think it was on the VIC-20. But you got the Commodore 64, starting off in 82 with very simple. People were just starting to figure it out. Nobody had a clue. They knew what the specs were. They had this new sound device that had a lot more flexibility than the sound chips from like the Intellivision with the Voice Master deal or whatever that was that you were describing in that episode.
Intellivision, yeah.
And then so they come out with this SID chip and this new MOS chip, and they're like starting off to see what the world was what that platform was capable of. And then eventually they started making full use of the sound capabilities. They started making full use of the 8-bit and the 16 colors. 16 colors. So when, the more, just like we usually do as humans, the more we started using the system, testing its limits, seeing what it was capable of, the company Commodore kept releasing equipment to maximize it, memory cartridges, all of these peripherals and expansions, and just the community becoming more knowledgeable on how to use the Commodore. You ended up with some of these games towards the end that were just like tip of the spear with graphics and really maxing out the capabilities of the system.
Yeah. And I think we have the hindsight to know that this market is going to continue to grow, and that computing power is going to double every 2 years, and kind of that Moore's law thing that we've talked about before. And you didn't know that at the time. I mean, as far as like the home computing market might have been a flop and it not have continued. So, yeah, I think, it's some interesting time. I'd love to go back there, and I guess I'm almost wondering, like, if I had followed that path, like if maybe this had been more entertaining to me, and I could see how like a PC gamer of the time, if I wanted to start that console PC conversation, you could say, well, I can make copies of my game. Like, how are you going to copy that cartridge? And I can modify my game if I want. Like, I can poke and peek, and I can do these things that you can't do. I could see the case being made, and I could say, yeah, yours costs $595. Mine costs, $200. And there's this back and forth that kind of, you see it starting, and maybe some people prefer one or the other.
I like to go both ways. Why are you laughing like that? Why are you making those faces? I like computers and I like consoles, you weirdo.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking about computers. Yeah. I've kind of came back to that, but I think what I'd love to convey to our listeners is this moment, I think, was what started me having a preference for the console. And I agree with you. It's never, like I said, I'm never going to touch a computer, but maybe I saw it for different things, like more word processing and data storage and that kind of thing. And I was going to get my gaming fix, on the console, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, and the consoles are, they're beasts, especially the new consoles coming out. I mean, we've got the Commodore 64 with 8-bit, and now the PlayStation 5 I think it's 256-bit. So that's huge. That's a massive jump, and it's only going to go up.
And you can see how, like, you can make that same argument, like, it's not customizable, but this computer that I've got here is highly customizable. A lot of the same sort of pluses and minuses, pros and cons of these exist to this day.
Yeah, the only con is that you don't have Rust downloaded. Not playing with your boy Ovox.
Dude, I do have Rust downloaded. What are you talking about?
Oh, shit. We're going to have to touch base here after we're done. What's up with this Planetfall and Jupiter Lander, man? You got this written down here that you were playing these a lot back in the day.
So Planetfall, I feel like is like the next evolution of the text-based game. It had this incredibly just well done packaging. Like, you had this whole sort of mission log and all these things in it that I remember just getting sucked into. Plus, I think it kind of wrote a little bit of back on the back of R2-D2. Like, there's a character called Floyd that's like this robot that kind of ultimately I don't want to give away the game, spoiler alert, like, he kind of makes the ultimate sacrifice for you in this game. And yeah, like how like R2 kind of did that too, like he was carrying the message from Princess Leia, and like he was
willing to go the full distance.
Yeah, like you could see his heart, in there. And we talked before how there's only so many tropes, like so many stories that are told, and like this is one of those. And Planetfall hit that like right on the head for me. I think it was the almost like a workbook type thing that you had with it, like that connected it. There was something that kind of went on TV. I think I had something as a kid called Picture Pages that went along with the Cosby Show, and like it kind of reminded me of that. Like there's something about like connecting those two things, like having this hard, tangible thing that you can interact with here. It is. kind of that memory, but I think I really enjoyed Zork, and it led to the purchase of this Planetfall game, and following through with it. Like as I mentioned earlier, like I want our listeners to realize, like the games that I brought up for us to talk about. Once I really started looking into the games, like these were not the best games.
No,
for this
man, not at
system.
all.
And
In fact, they were all text based, and all the other games are like, damn.
Like, the other one I brought up was Jupiter Lander. It's kind of a clone for this Lunar Lander game that was in the arcade and on some other systems. And I do remember playing that, like, and it being more like a traditional video game, like that is a little more finished product with graphics and that kind of thing. So,
yeah, that did look
but ultimately this is my experience. Like, this is what I remember. And even though these are some of the most rudimentary games, like I do have great memories of them. And it was really fun to like anticipate your reaction to the Zork and that kind of thing. And I also went and watched some videos of other people playing it and learned some things myself. Like you know, I was only 10 years old when I was attacking these things, so I've gotten a little smarter and wiser, hopefully, since then.
You know, Zork has a few Easter eggs out there. One of them, it's in the outline that we have, was that it was featured in Activision's 2010 Call of Duty Black Ops as an Easter egg. In the main menu of the game, the player can get up from a chair and find a computer. Typing Zork into this computer will start Zork 1. Zork 1 is
full version.
fully playable on Call of Duty Black Ops, in case you guys want to get into it, you know, get after it.
Yeah, I think it's in there. Like, I think, you know, it just kind of told you what was possible here, like this adventure that was going to take place in these games. Like these folks at MIT, obviously, that put this on that mainframe first there. I think it was the MIT Dynamic Modeling Group or something. It was called. There were some smart dudes like there in the late 70s, and. You know, I'm going to use this analogy of like music. Like you had this thing going on with music, like music kind of was really, the songs were super happy and that kind of thing. And then you had Bob Dylan come along and start writing songs, you know, that were much deeper and that kind of thing. And so it kind of said, okay, this is where music can go, or this is where, you know, our next artist will start writing about in this fashion. And I think it's almost like you see these guys doing something similar here, like just kind of laying that groundwork for adventure in this world that we escape into.
Yeah, I feel like, considering the amount of games that were produced for this machine, man, so many, I feel like there may have been every kind of developer you can think of, like huge development companies, tiny development companies, independent dudes that got like maybe independent deals where they could, I just feel like they were just pumping games out like crazy. Because
dude, and it's still going on today. Like that's what's crazy about it. Like there's competitions today, like where the prize is to get your game published for this thing. I mean, it blows my mind. Like, who's doing that today? Like,
and they've released new versions of the Commodore 64. Of course, it's not the original 80s breadbasket version, but you can get, like, I think it's called the C64 Mini, and it comes with all new, you know, tech inside. I think it even has an NVIDIA chip in there, you know, HDMI, all the full kit. So it's held it's holding its place in history.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that makes it fun to look at it. Well, you know, that kind of covers the games I played. Like I say, I you know, definitely apologize to listeners that I didn't get into some of the better games and have some more firsthand knowledge of that. But you know, we did kind of in our research. I saw a number of games come up, and I think it led to two really funny things or good things I want to talk about. Is I kind of came up with my top 5 weirdest Commodore 64 game names.
Yeah, I got a list too.
Also, we our buddy over there at Retro Dodo had composed a list, I think as of 2021, what it considered the top 22 best games that had ever came out for the system. Yes, I think both those things would be fun to talk about.
Maybe we could just do the top 5 of retro dodos, because that's a very long list. But let me pull that up too here, because I've also got a couple of lists, including a weird names list. But man, like, if you just go like type in list of Commodore 64 games, there's so many games that Wikipedia had to break it down into 2 separate like lists.
Like a
Yeah,
encyclopedia.
A through whatever, and then whatever through Z. You know.
Yeah.
All right. You want to start with weirdest named games you could find for the Commodore 64? We'll do 1 and 1. You can go first, and then I'll bust one out.
All right, I got my list here. Well, I want to start with Woody the Worm.
What year do you have the year? Oh man,
I don't have the year for Woody. I'm thinking that's an 80s game, but
well, yeah. It better be. Okay, let me see here. Pool of Radiance, 1988, which actually was a Dungeons and Dragons game, licensed.
Interesting.
But I like the way it said Pool of Radiance.
We got a deep pool of radiance around here.
Oh boy, get her done.
Let's see what else I've got. I'm just going to go for the juggler right away. Is Cock In.
Jeez, seriously? Oh.
There's a game called Cock In where you play as a chicken.
Okay.
And
man.
I think you end up getting beat over the head with a frying pan at some point. I saw, and you're pretty much just putting your cock in different situations.
Great. That's beautiful. All right, I'm gonna go for the top one that I could find. It's called Graham Gooch's Test Cricket. Graham Gooch's Test Cricket. What? Next one I got here on the list. No, it's your turn, Tomahawk.
I got Bozo's Night Out. Like,
really? That doesn't sound too crazy. That sounds like something we would see in today's times.
It's a game where you're a drunk, and you go to the bar, and you have Bozo's Night Out, and if you bump into people, you end up in the hospital. It's pretty much just surviving being a drunk.
I found one here called How to Be a Complete Bastard. That's the name of a game. What is up? Commodore 64. Got any?
I got Thing on a Spring. How about that?
There we go. Gosh, man, there's too many. There's too many options.
Did you see there was a strip poker game?
I didn't, man. There's
Samantha
just too many
Fox
options.
Strip poker.
A couple of the games that kept popping up for me everywhere, and all of the top 10, top 15, top 20, was a game called Load Runner, which was particularly popular in the U.S., anxiety causing. And then there's another game, came out in 1984. This was on a lot of the tops, and this was a clear copy, in my opinion. It's called Impossible Mission. And you know, not to be confused with Mission Impossible.
No, yeah, I feel like Tom Cruise maybe stole this from them possibly, but I think that comes out number one on Retro Dodo's list and on a lot of lists that I saw, but not.
One of the things I got to find it real quick is because I don't want to screw it up. Is that Impossible Mission game is known for a voice that would come. Let me see if I can find it. As soon as you'd start the game, it said something to the effect of, I can't find it, and I don't want to waste too much time looking for it online, but you'd start the Impossible Mission game, and you'd kind of just like fall in there, or like you take an elevator or something and you're there, and like a voice would come up and say, a visitor, stay a while, stay forever. And then the game would begin. And that's like, that was it. You'd start the game and this weird voice would come up, a visitor, stay a while, stay forever. And that's what kind of like made that game stand out, it looks like.
Dude, you're like, I feel like you've really got the vibe of this thing, because like just when you're saying that, like I could picture myself, like, say, spending a whole weekend at my house when I was 10 years old, like with some type in program where I got it to say like happy birthday.
Yeah. Via your own like, programming.
Yeah, and for a while it would be like happy like I'd have to go back and fix that, and like, but it's just like even like something simple like that, like it's the first time you're seeing a game do that. Like it's the first time, like especially you affected that change yourself. And I think you can see why they would centerpiece something like that, is my point. Like, because it probably was groundbreaking compared to what they could have done with that VIC-20 chip. Mm-hmm. They were kind of seeing where that SID chip was going to take them.
Absolutely.
But, I want to mention Ghostbusters. That showed up on a lot of my list, and I think like it's kind of like one of the reasons that I heard is that it kind of captures that essence of the movie.
It does. The music is like spot on.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I saw like some gameplay, like where you got the traps and you got to kind of go hit them with I forget exactly what those things are called, the plasma blasters. Yeah. But yeah, you had to trap that thing, and yeah, I could see it. Like I didn't play it, but I could certainly see it, and I remember like just being super into that movie. So
totally.
Yeah.
What else do we got here? One of the really kind of like a hidden gem, and it was 3D, was Train Escape to Normandy, released in 1988. And there was also like a stunt jumper game where you were in a car, and it was kind of like a first-person view. You're like, sorry, I bumped the microphone again. You're sitting in this car, and it was a 3D image before you of sitting in the car, and you're just going on these ramps, kind of like a roller coaster thing, and you just stunt driving, and you just catch air, and it'd go like wah, wah, wah. And since it was a frontal view, using very simple lines, the developers were able to create like a 3D track that you were going on. Real simple.
Like it was kind of like a first person kind of view. Like
exactly.
You couldn't see your car, like you were looking out the windshield.
You could see the front of the car and the hot rod, like, pipes coming out.
I guarantee that's the first time that ever was programmed. And I saw that game you're talking about too. That train game looked fun as shit. I couldn't believe, like one thing that blew me away was how much Nazi symbolism was in there, but I guess it fit the game.
Well, yeah, Escape to Normandy.
Yeah, so like my first reaction was like, "What the?"
Yeah.
Like,
dude, it was like
cool, but then,
half train simulator, half. Well, like in that game, you'd be driving this freaking train, and then you'd go into a different view, and there'd be like planes flying above the train, and you'd shoot them down with like a beachhead type of style thing. Like there'd be just like a turret on the train, just going, and it was all 3D.
You know how fun that had to be, like compared to like your basic 2D side-scrolling game. Like, I mean, the way you were riding that train and you were shooting those people off to the side, like I thought they nailed that. Like that looked fun as shit. Like I could see that being fun today, even.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I just feel like, this is almost like a golden age of gaming, like where, so many things haven't been done before. And, it just like you say, some of those do stand out as innovators.
Jack,
I'm sure you saw
Jack Trammell and the Commodore company, man, they created something that made its mark in history, and not only did it make its mark, but it held its place for, well, I think it was from 1982 to 1994.
Wow.
So, 14 years-ish, a little more, a little less. And today it continues to be a topic of interest and of development, and it holds the world record, for units sold or for best, home computer system, whatever the details on that are. That's clearly an established record, and it's one hell of a little system. Like, I'm definitely gonna get on the emulators more just to play some of those games, to experience them and, well, get the most I can out of it. I don't have a Commodore 64, and I don't think I'm gonna get one. What you can do, I think you can find them for like 50, 60, $70, maybe more, maybe less. I'm sure you could find them in Japan, all over the place. But in the meantime, we got those emulators.
Yeah, that'd be something fun to do. Like, maybe
we could connect and play Zork together, man. That'd be fun. Like, all right, John, what do we do here? What do we do, Tomahawk?
Yeah. I think it'd be fun to get like even like Pepe involved. Like, I think it would be funny to watch his reaction to it too. Like, being just a tad bit younger too. Like it was fun for me to hear you talk about what you saw, and yeah, I think the takeaway is just that, like, in these games, like even like when we're playing Ark, you kind of get out of it what you put into it. When you buy in and sort of, like I talked about when I first played, like how I was really conscious of that I was in a 3D simulation of sorts. But now that I've been playing for a while, I mean, I feel like I'm in a real world, like, and it's amazing how that it doesn't have to be the exact quality of the graphics. Sometimes it's the story, and
yes, especially with the Lander, not the Lander game, the what is it? What was it called?
Jupiter Lander, yeah.
Not Jupiter Lander. What was the other one, Tomahawk, that you played a lot?
Planetfall.
Planetfall
and
Zork 1. Games like that. There's a couple of other text-based games. Those games, man, tickle the imagination. Like, they're tickling your imagination cells up in there in that brain, trying to get you to create the world on your own, just using little simple directives. Like, hey, like with the case of Zork, you're standing outside of a White House in the West Yard. There's a mailbox. What do you want to do? And it just like it's like, oh man, like in your imagination, and it just sparks that, it really puts that into the hands of the end user, which is something that in other games isn't quite as much the case, because they're doing that part for you. They're showing you, here's the world, this is the objective, this is the end game, this is what you want to do. Here, have fun. And then with these text-based games, that's all put into your hands.
Yeah, you almost see like a comparison of the difference of watching a movie versus like maybe hearing the book read on a radio program or reading a book. Like, I think I've heard radio described as the theater of the mind, and this has a little more of that. Like there's a little more like you got to do it yourself rather than it being depicted for you on the screen, and I think that leads to tons of individuality. The way you approach that will be different than the way I do.
Yeah, it's almost like open world games in a weird way. Obviously, it's not, but kind of open in a sense that it's as open as your imagination. Ooh, yeah.
And like we talked about that dopamine hit, like when you got that mailbox to open, and you were able to. Yeah. Well, imagine when you found an Easter egg in there or something, something. Because for me, I see like this is inspired. Like, what is it? The Odyssey, the book called the Odyssey that talks about Hades and Homer and all that. Like you see, like there's sort of an inspiration from that they've taken here, and Yeah, it kind of drives my imagination in that case. Like I think in school I probably was forced to read part of the Odyssey or whatever, and yeah, that was my first exposure to this kind of underworld kind of vibe, and that's what I take from Zork. So yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I think we've covered most of everything. What are your takeaways from this, Tomahawk? What's your final comments on this piece of equipment here that you had a special relationship with?
Yeah, I have a few. Like I say, I feel like it was the beginning of for me personally of looking at comparing consoles to PCs, and like I kind of went with the console. It blew my mind just how popular this thing was and how still popular today that it is, and it was just really fun to go back and look at it. And I hope that the listeners kind of feel that with us, and we'll do some research of their own, and maybe play an emulator or two of these things, and think about that, like just how I said, like it really boils down to what you put into it. So maybe when we're playing Ark, like maybe I just let myself go into the story a little more. I don't know that I could get too much more into it, but yeah, just appreciating that fact, that you kind of get out of it what you put into it.
Absolutely.
How about you? What was like some of your takeaways?
Man, I thought about this last night, and I had a really good, simple takeaway, and now for the life of me, I can't bring it to the surface to remember. But I think the takeaway is that the Commodore 64 set the groundwork. It set it kind of like established the path for a lot of different things that we experience today. Just in terms of developers being able to learn how to get the most out of a platform that they plan on publishing on. I think the Commodore kind of set the scene for that amazing things are possible if you maximize the potential of the technology. I think it set the stage in a lot of ways for creativity as well, and that kind of piggybacks on my first takeaway, but creativity. And I think it also set it set the stage for a lot of other things that aren't necessarily gamer experience related, like licensing issues, marketing, sales, game production. I think it really just established a lot of things for the future of gaming and PCs. So, and they killed it. They killed it. They did a great job. They sold a lot of units, made a lot of games, made it a very accessible piece of machinery to the masses, which I think was a great thing. That's not really a takeaway necessarily, but I think they also set the stage in a lot of ways for future consumers, bringing it to everyone, kind of maybe being the first system to come to everyone's door, not just the upper echelons of, the society there. So, my takeaway is I'm grateful to the Commodore 64, if anything.
Yeah.
I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I'm excited that I got to experience it, and kind of definitely want to revisit it some more, and hopefully see some of these games show up on a console compilation type disc. Maybe at some point I'd definitely check them out.
Hell, they're probably out there. Now that we're diving into these topics, we can check it out. I'm definitely going to go back and try out Zork again and some other games, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, check that window in the back. Well, it's on the east side of the house, I believe it is.
Well, all right. I think we should wrap this one up, Tomahawk. We've had a good episode here. What do you think?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
We got some contact information maybe we should share with folks?
I think so. You want to drop that on them?
Yeah, we've got a Gmail account there at ovoxandchuk@gmail. That's ovoxandchuk@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hit us up. This podcast, it's a small one. We're independent. We're just trying to have a good time with these convos. But for us to get out there and to get to more ears, we really are depending on you, the listening NPCs out there. If you like us, please, give us a review. If you're on the Apple Podcasts, 5 stars in a review would be amazing. That would help us tremendously. Even if it's a horrible review where you're telling us how much we suck, as long as it's 5 stars, we'll give you a shout out. We'd love to hear it. We'll read it out loud. Doesn't matter.
That's right. Don't discriminate.
Yeah, a huge shout out to our first subs there on YouTube. We're very grateful. And we also got a Facebook now, if you want to follow us on there. It's facebook.com/New Wave Gaming Podcast. No underscores or periods or anything like that, just fluid. Facebook.com/New Wave Gaming Podcast. We'll come up there. Drop us a like if you like. Follow us. And yeah, we really appreciate the love and support. The more you share us out there, the more we'll get out to other listeners, and we'll keep having a good old fun time here.
Yeah. Special shout out to the folks in the UK. Maybe we'll send you some ranch dressing over there or something like that.
I'll send some flan for my parts, man.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I was playing that Rust, and you get into that stuff, man. You start crafting satchels and bean cans and explosives, man. I woke up this morning tempted to go raid my neighbors, see where they were stashing that flan, baby. Flan in that horchata.
That tasty flan.
Sometimes on the weekends, I just want to, break all the rules. Go order some pizza, flan, boneless chicken wings.
Dude, lucky. I'd be down there at Lucky 23 getting that flan right now. Eating an octopus and a flan.
What a combo. With a classic marg.
Yeah.
Or some Pacificos.
I'd probably go Pacifico. Maybe a shot.
All right. Sounds like a plan. I look forward to it. All right, Tomahawk. All right, everybody. We really appreciate you tuning in and look forward to talking to you in the next episode. Tomahawk, I love you, man.
Love you too, brother. Peace.
Bye.